Hello and welcome to this episode of Breakeven by Breakfast on the accounting channel with me, Colin Sweetman, and I'm happy to be joined today by Declan Murphy, CEO of DataLive, the company behind Allsorter. Before this, Declan was a finance director of some big listed multinationals, and he gives great insight into how to approach raising capital with investors. As usual, Breakeven by Breakfast is sponsored by firstaccounts.ie, Ireland's forward-thinking accountants. Link in the description below, and enjoy the interview. So for those who haven't heard of Allsorter, can you tell us a bit about the company, what problem it solves, and how it started?
Sure, and listen, thanks very much for the invite. I'm excited to be here today. It's been a really challenging time for us as a business, but so Allsorter is a text engineering company. But what does that mean? So anybody who has been trying to extract information from a document, okay, so it's a PDF or a Word, typically when you try to get that information out, it will mangle it in some way. It'll lose or inherit different characteristics, which can take quite a lot of time. So what we've done is we've created, we call it the world's most intelligent text engineering platform, where we take documents in any shape, size, or format, we strip out the data, we essentially liquidize that data, and then we can give it back to the consumer of the product in any shape, size, format that's available under the sun. So I'll give you a practical example. Our first product, allsorter.com, is a platform that's selling B2B into the staffing and talent acquisition companies all over the world. And what it does is takes the pain that recruiters that typically get your CV or resume in have to extract information, redact bias, put it back together again with fonts, logos, styling in their standard homogenized brand that reduces format bias. What we've done is we've decimated the transaction time to do that piece of work, and it has saving our customers a lot of time to actually get back in front of their own clients. So that's essentially what it did. Ultimately, the genesis for the concept was I was a finance director of a number of multinational companies, and when the chips were down, for instance, in 2008, we were receiving a huge influx of people after the financial crash looking for jobs. Typically, we were going to use recruitment agencies, but we said we'd do it for a cost conservation method to get people in directly. It was so difficult, just to manage that avalanche of resumes coming in and then trying to shortlist them. It was really, really challenging for the HR department. I looked all over the marketplace for something that wasn't there, and it was something that I had in the back of my mind that I wanted to see if we could fix it. Myself, I got the opportunity with a redundancy check in 2012. I was back on the market looking for another FD job. And when I was back out in the market, I realized very quickly that all the rich data that is in our resumes is essentially lost when you send it off to the recruiter. They keep it in their head, but in terms of their CRM or ATSs, as they call it, applicant tracking systems, about 4% of what's in the rich data that you spend hours toiling over is kept by their CRM. So the whole black hole concept springs to mind, whereby you put all your skills and competencies into your resume, it goes into the CRM, it might never be found again. Typically, what our product is saving also is that companies would offshore to BPOs, business process outsourcing companies. And a lot of this is happening in India and the Philippines, whereby they send documents over there, they bring them back after a while. Everything is being manually done. Millions of resumes every day are being manually reformatted.
Is that against GDPR though? Or is that like sending data like that across to outside of Europe?
A lot of the companies would have, we'll call it cast iron, legal contracts with these BPOs. And possibly you, the client, will have signed something to say, by the way, as long as this is kept on someone's server, it's okay. But I think there would be some dubious practices out there as well, Colin, to be honest with you. So all in all, it's our phase one product. We launched it in 2019. We're absolutely delighted with the feedback, and we're selling into government, staffing agencies, and corporates. So that's it.
I was going to ask what your minimum viable product was and when it was built. So it's obviously this one, and it's built in 2019. I was actually
absolutely. Well, I could just give you a little bit more background. When I started building this, obviously I'm not a technologist. I don't claim to be. So I did have a very significant interest in technology and the evolution of, the whole digital transformation and what that was becoming. And I also saw that, like, if you look at the marketplace and the landscape, technology is certainly in the area of finance. It's been kind of harnessed and adopted in the area of marketing. We've seen how that works. But in the area of HR, we still have the filing cabinet and, documents there. We have the quite old manual processes for managing the employee journey. So that is, that's something that I really wanted to fix. What we did was we did a Science Foundation Ireland study, and then we got backed by Enterprise Ireland to even follow it up. And finally, we were invested in by the European Investment Bank through the Horizon 2020 program, using the best of breed data scientists from the Insight Center for Data Analytics in UCG and in DCU. So, and our current CTO has come from there. So approximately 2.5 to 3 years of R&D, soft launched in June of 19, did a full launch in November 19, and started scaling after that and adopting some really, really big partnerships in the world of HR and staffing. The largest staffing ATS CRM platform in the world is a partner of ours. We just signed a partnership with the largest one in APAC. It's called JobAdder, and Microsoft for Startups has taken our product on board, and we are doing some work with them on the pilot basis.
See, I was actually thinking that DataLive, I could think of many other applications for the product, and I'm wondering why you chose to go for human resources. How did you know there would be demand for that product in HR?
It's a question very close to my heart, Colin. Essentially, we went there because what I was saying, it's the low-hanging fruit. HR and staff was the least adopter of digital transformation. So we said we could go in there first, prove the concept works, commercialize it and scale it. But equally, we're doing a lot of work in the medical sector. We're looking at, there's a huge amount of data transfer there, especially around R&D with compliance, etc. We're doing some work there. And the legal sector, which absolutely, the quill and ink and the whole, the slowness and the amount of paper that is just, around courtrooms and solicitors' offices. Again, slow adopter of digital transformation. So they're in our line of sight at the moment.
How come? What makes them so slow at adopting to new technology? I can see why a big bank would be slow, but I can't see why individual HR offices or practices would be.
Yeah, it's interesting. It could be the demographic of who work in HR, and I don't want to be disparaging about anybody. I think it's more to do with, there's so much compliance, there's so much data protection, legislation and protection of the employee, etc., and the paperwork associated with all of that. It's so kind of immense that there is no all-encompassing solution. So you have, for instance, in large corporates, you've got SAP, SuccessFactors, you've got Workday, which is not a very, very large one. You've got PeopleFluent. And all of these companies try their best to, provide a certain amount of infrastructure around the paper transfer. But in terms of the text engineering piece, I think the biggest blocker to adoption is trust. And it's trust that technology heretofore hasn't been very good. So for instance, some people say to us, oh, this is parsing. And I think, just for everyone's benefit, parsing is the ability to extract data. But that's typically about 60% effective. So for instance, maybe a lot of people would have understood, I've certainly seen it at first hand, when you apply for a job, typically the parsing in the CRM system that the company uses extracts the data and tries to put it together again in a form digitally, and typically can really do a bad job at that. So hence, HR is worried that if you're trying to apply a solution to a problem that they have, will there be some issues? And if it's an issue that misrepresents their employee or a candidate, there could be, an issue around the whole litigation around that. So that, in my book, is probably the biggest impediment.
I wanted to go also on an interesting point you said about format bias. Was that correct? How it comes in or how it looks, the CV itself?
Yeah, it's very interesting. We see that with the US customers, that they talk about gender bias, which we all know. They talk about location bias. So typically we redact the location of the candidate when it's going into a pre-formatted template. And then format is, your resume might look fantastic, and then my resume might look terrible, or vice versa. And we would have a subconscious bias as a third party looking at those two resumes, and that's unfair in their book. So typically, if all the formats are homogenized, well then it's just taking another layer of bias out of the selection process.
Has anyone ever argued that bias could be a strong point, as in it could show someone being lazy or being creative?
Well, you see, that's the truth. Basically, a lot of people go on to these resume making sites now. So you can go in and pay $20 and get a brand new resume that looks fantastic. But you could say that's laziness as well, that you just took your $20. Maybe someone else didn't have the $20, but was a better candidate. It's hard to measure. So they just think that just stripping all that out and just making everyone look the same, so that they typically can just look at skills, competencies, previous roles, and personal achievements. That's all they want to see. They don't want to see a beautiful graphic that shows your skills increment over the number of years you've been working or something like that. And the other thing as well, in terms of that format bias, is that a lot of the new resume makers have these beautiful templates, but when they go into the CRM I mentioned, they're not fit for extraction. So they just mangle and kind of churn up within the CRM. So then it's actually counterproductive from the job seeker's perspective. So if you are sending in a resume that's been pre-made by someone and looks fantastic, be careful that it just goes directly into the person's inbox. Because if it goes into one of their ATSs or CRMs, the likelihood is it will be churned up, and it won't look really good on the other side.
Well, now we know what happens to our CVs that never got a response, I guess.
Absolutely.
I always thought actually LinkedIn were also trying to get into this kind of space by creating their CVs from your profile. So you just take a PDF of your profile and send it to the recruiter.
They did. And I think the reason that didn't work was because a lot of people have overly embellished their profiles, and equally they don't have enough on their profile. So your CV is a full snapshot of everything you've done if you've actually applied some time to actually, develop your CV. Whereas your LinkedIn profile is almost like a subset. So not comprehensive enough. And LinkedIn also, I'm not sure if you remember, and they still do this actually, since they've been acquired by Microsoft, if you go on to a Word document at the moment and you look like you're, compiling a CV, out will come a wizard and say, hey, it looks like you're coming up with a, developing your own resume. We can help you with this wizard, right? So they're at that. But again, text extraction and the ability to extract to a very high level of accuracy is a significant problem for lots of businesses, including LinkedIn. For instance, LinkedIn had an apply with LinkedIn button, if you recall, at some point. If you see a job, apply with LinkedIn, they switched that off because, again, that was causing some issues transferring the data into the customer's CRM or ATS. So, yeah. But LinkedIn, Indeed, as well, have a resume builder. And again, just to be very clear, the difference between what we do and what lots of other companies do in terms of resume builders for the consumer, the B2C market, is that they make them look good, right? But if you look at a CV today, and we can see it has type font, it has words, it has logic, we can see that and we can comprehend it as a human. A machine mightn't be able to read it like that. Remember, machine reads in XML, marked up language. So what we've done is we convert the words into various different processes behind the scenes, and in seconds it converts to what looks to you and I like a Word document. But in essence, what it is it's actually an XML version of a Word document in exactly the font style and layout that you have required from us. So once it's in that XML, then the machine readability is basically catapulted.
So yeah, we see the same thing happening with invoices in accounts functions. They just get read and turned into XML files basically. So it's no need for a human to actually input any data or change data. I want to actually move on from this and go on to more of about your startup. So as a startup, what's the most challenging non-financial aspect of your business?
Okay, there's a good few there. So people, obviously the lifeblood of your business, the most important, to get people who share the vision, especially in a startup when things can get a bit bumpy, and you don't have a big, team with loads of, resources to do all sorts of different experiments. But the people and the selection of the right people has been an absolutely critical part of the journey. So that has been, like everything else, it's going to have, hits and misses. We've got some fantastic hits, and we've had some spectacular misses as well. And, the more time you interview people and they come in and they talk to you about, themselves and why they want to join your company, and then, once you get them on board and whatever, a lot of people like the sound of working for a startup, but working for a startup is not easy. It's not like Silicon Valley with, couches, free food, and football and all that. I know we've got a bit of that in Dublin as well, but like ultimately it is about hard work, it's about sacrifice, but it's fantastically rewarding because you have autonomy in lots of cases to make a huge difference in a short amount of time, which typically that's not afforded to you when you work in a large company. So that's the most important thing non-financially. The other part of it non-financially is the fact that as a founder of a business that has scaled in global markets, it's a huge toll on your time. And you've got to be really, really laser focused on what you want to do every day, right? And that sounds a little bit kind of over the top, but there's so much noise coming at you as a single founder. It's much easier if you had two or three founders, for instance, to bounce things off. But just distilling all of that noise that comes into you. So when you're in digital marketing, you're on LinkedIn, you're being pinged constantly. There's all sorts of different things coming in at you. It's how do you manage your time with, ruthlessness almost. Don't go over 30 minutes for an interview or for a meeting. Just try and keep your focus as strong as possible on the strategy that you need to get to, and just don't be distracted. So there would be the key non-financial issues that you face as a founder.
Excellent. Actually, everyone we've talked to said team building and culture have been the hardest part of building their startup, getting the right people, basically. Onto the more juicy topic of finances. When did you realize that you first needed to raise finance for this?
Well, I think I always needed finance, because if you think about it, this is a SaaS platform that we have built. And, traditionally SaaS platforms, they might work perfectly, but they need a lot of marketing, they need a lot of engineering and support, and they need a lot of selling. So once you get product market fit, you definitely need then to go to the market and look for, future fundraising. So initially, and I take a step back, once we knew that we hit on the right team in terms of the engineering, we also had the right concept in terms of like getting out of the building, meeting potential customers and understanding, that this was a runner commercially. Then it was a case of getting some seed money in the bank, building a product that could be scaled. And once you start scaling, then you say, okay, well, now I understand I can scale it. The more finance I put into the business, the more we can get back for, say, return for the shareholder. So once we had got absolute, recurring customer revenue, we got a lot of positive feedback, and we got the product market fit in November of 2019, we knew then it was time to go out and raise a significant amount of money to get us to the next level, which is going to be Series A. So we did that, started that journey last November, and basically it's been uncharted water since. But that's typically when see, you have a gut feeling when it's time to go. And you're always, as a founder, you're always looking at, obviously, cash flow. You're looking at strengthening your business model by hiring the best people to give, the scale and the traction that you need to give the return to the shareholder. So, and you're looking at your next fundraise, because all the time you're only 9 months from your next, or less from your next fundraise.
I see. What were your first steps in raising finance? Like, if we went into detail about it, what did you actually do to approach people looking for finance?
Well, it depends. So if it's seed, the initial finance, seed, basically Enterprise Ireland for our Irish startups, anyone who's based in Ireland. I couldn't recommend them enough. According to PitchBook, I believe Enterprise Ireland is the second or the largest seed investor in Europe.
I think it's the largest, actually.
Enterprise Ireland. It's amazing. And without Enterprise Ireland, you're in big trouble, because they're government backing. They're giving you not just the money, but they're giving you the support, their network, global offices, all sorts of really good insights and market experts. So I couldn't recommend them enough. But you need to go in, you need to build a relationship, you need to get out, have coffee with some people who have worked with Enterprise Ireland, and you need to pitch, and you need then to get, another investor on the other side. So to match what they will give you. So I've got to say, I tried hard by pitching and pitching again and pitching again until such time as we got them on board.
So
And
it
then,
basically was just annoy them until they give in, basically.
yeah, it was a kind of case of like, I pitched first and no, we don't like this, but if you did this and that back to us. So just being persistent about it without being kind of annoying, but it's more like just
Persistent.
being determined and dogmatic about it. And we did that successfully. And as a result of that, we got follow-on investment from a private investor in the UK. And because of their help and support, we also got follow seed money as well. So again, really, really important to look at that. And as well, in my book, not stick with Ireland, because Ireland is, it's a tiny market for an international SaaS business, right? So you've got a very kind of, we call it exclusive network of VCs in Ireland. And, they're all very busy. If you're not in that network, and I wasn't in that network, and I didn't try to be in the network, in terms of investing my time in, going to all these events and meeting people, I didn't really do that until such time as I was really happy that our business was very scalable. So probably as time passed, I realized, look, UK, US, that's something that you need to do more than just rely on the Irish VC network, just in my opinion.
Okay. And when you got funding or finance from outside investors, what do they want from you? I don't mean in terms of capital or equity. I mean in terms of what documentation did they want? Did they want to see cash flow reports for 4 years, for instance?
Yeah, it's significant what they'll be looking for. So they'll be looking for obviously your pitch deck. They'll be looking for your legals, terms around licenses, domains, IP. Okay, then it's your sales forecast, it's your high level forecast, your pipeline. So all your sales pipeline, and what is your methodology around it? What's your sales execution plan? Who's driving it? How does it happen? What's your experience like over the last number of months? Where are you going in terms of your book, we call it, of clients? How do you intend to basically, convert them? What's the conversion cycle time? How long does it take from a demo to a close? What's the cash flow implication? So do people pay up front, monthly, annually? What levels of discounts do you give? What levels of commissions do you give? So there's a huge raft of information that's required by the investor to show, that your numbers stack and that they make sense long term, and that they will get an ROI if they drop the investment in or tranche it, and how important it is for you to make sure that all of the questions the investors typically ask, you've researched them in advance of preparing your documentation, so that when they go through it, then it's a case of, okay, we get this, yeah, we like what you're doing, rather than showing something that, may have some broad brush assumptions, not going to wash, and essentially you're going to undermine your proposition and ultimately undermine your enterprise value when you are actually pitching for, X for Y%.
Have you ever been grilled on any of this information that you're giving to investors to make sure that you knew exactly what was happening financially in your startup?
Yeah, absolutely. I have. Now I have the added advantage that I am a finance person. So you're typically grilled on the number, and where did you get those numbers? So interestingly enough, the US VC will grill you even harder, I feel, And that's just a personal kind of, we'll say, comment, but than the UK or the Irish investor. So you need to be really on top of your game. So if I was to advise anyone, I would, like, for instance, your sales execution plan, your forecast, your pipeline, all of that. You need to have all of that detail and be prepared for the left field shot where someone asks you, turn it on its head, half of your predictions don't come true. What's the plan B? Have all that ready. Prepare yourself. And for instance, I would prepare myself, a day in advance. Make sure you can second guess the questions that the investor would ask you.
I see. Thanks very much. And what's the best tip that you can give to someone who's going in front of an investor?
The best tip, I would say, ultimately, what you've got to do is you've got to be authentic. You've got to be yourself, because investors invest in you and your team nearly more than the actual business. Obviously, the business model has to stack up. Otherwise, you wouldn't even be invited into the room. But you've got to be as close to being, your authentic self, why you and your team are the best people in the world to drive a business like yours right now to execute on the mission. So have that, and it sounds a little bit corny, but it's really, really true. So I've had one investor tell me, the reason we're investing is because of you and your team, and we really like the product as well. But we know you guys can actually go and execute. So you got to have that, but there's a balance, because, that's the kind of soft stuff, but you really need to be really, really on top of your game. The pitch is really important. So, the pitch is the initial, but sometimes you will be asked to pitch again to other partners in the VC firm. So you've got to make sure that, it's consistent and it hits the right notes and it's not full of words and it just tells a story. So telling the story is really important, with the punchline of why you are the best person to drive this at this particular point in time.
That's really good advice. Thanks for that. I'm sure lots of people would like to hear that, because they don't hear it enough, or maybe they have never heard it.
They hear, and I'll give you another example. And basically, a lot of people have told me, if you don't explain exactly what you do, because, everyone has these fantastic, concepts and designs and, various things that can change the world and all of that, but they're really bad at explaining it. So I remember on a few occasions, I just said, what I'm going to do is, here, this is how we do it, this is why we do it, and this is where we're doing it, right? And just kind of simple, and perfected that so that when you explain the descriptor around what you do, it's simple for anybody to grasp. And non-techie people sometimes become very excited and very overwrought with their language around what they do and, why they're doing it. You've got to break it down into simple, parsimonious facts in plain language as much as you can, because the listener will actually resonate and understand that a lot more. And if they do, they'll get a lot more interested in what you're doing.
I think the best example of that is Winston Churchill. Just plain, simple English, and get the message across.
Absolutely. And, we tend to overdo it sometimes. And maybe that can be nervousness or, excitement or whatever. Stop. Silence is very important too, so keep it short, keep it snappy, keep it interesting, and, keep it real.
My last question is to do with the title of the show, Breakeven by Breakfast. So we're using it as an analogy for your business journey, breakfast time being the break-even point. So with that in mind, is it breakfast time yet for your business, or are you approaching lunchtime or dinner?
Okay, so if that's the case, I'm starving at the moment because I haven't eaten in a few days. So essentially, we've come to a journey whereby, we have a fantastic product that's scaling internationally. We've got a great team. COVID-19 has hit us, like lots of companies, whereby we had a lot of commitments by funders, and funders right across the globe have hit the brakes. But interestingly enough, by hitting the brakes allowed us to pivot slightly into really, really large customers that we thought we would never have got, and they are now considering basically taking this on board, which would catapult our value even more. But to answer your question very simply, we're not, as a SaaS business, it's going to be a while before we pay back the shareholder for the investment in the R&D, in the engineering that we did. So we won't be cash positive until the end of this year.
Oh, thanks. I wish you the best of luck, and thanks very much for coming onto the show, Declan, and sharing your experience with us. I found it really enjoyable and insightful, and I hope our viewers do the same, or did the same. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you again for another episode of Breakeven by Breakfast. Thank you, Declan.
Thank you. All the best.